Discipline is not your problem. You don't lack willpower, you lack consequences. Picture this. It's late. Your phone lights up. You said you'd start tomorrow. Again, there is no fear in your body, no cost, no pressure, just another quiet promise that dissolves in the dark. That is why nothing changes. You were taught the wrong frame. Society tells you to motivate yourself, to summon discipline like a mood. Machiavelli would call that fantasy. Humans do not move because of ideals. They move because of incentives and fear. They move when the price of staying the same becomes unbearable. Here is the diagnosis. Your environment is soft. Your life absorbs failure without penalty. You miss the workout, the deadline, the boundary, and nothing happens. No loss of status. No loss of access. No damage to reputation. The machinery learns a simple rule. Delay is safe. Comfort is protected. So your mind betrays you again tomorrow. Look closer. In every arena where people perform consistently, there are consequences baked into the system. Miss weight, you're cut. Miss quota, you're replaced. Break formation, you're exposed. Discipline looks heroic from the outside, but inside, it is just obedience to cost. Machiavelli understood this. He did not ask men to be virtuous. He designed structures where virtue was necessary for survival. He knew that a prince who relies on character alone will fail. Power is architecture. It is the placement of gates, guards, and punishments, so behavior becomes inevitable. By the end of this procedure, you will stop begging yourself to be disciplined. You will build consequences that force action. You will replace motivation with inevitability. Your posture will change because the rules changed. But listen carefully. Once you see this, you cannot unsee it. You will never again blame laziness. You will see every failure as a design flaw you allowed. That knowledge removes excuses forever. We're not here to inspire you. We're here to install pressure. Step inside the machinery. You keep asking how to be more disciplined. That question itself is the weakness. Look at the pattern. You set a rule for yourself. Wake up early, train, focus, speak less, then you break it, and nothing happens. No one is watching. No one takes anything away. Your status remains intact. Your comfort remains intact. So your brain updates the map. Rules without consequence are suggestions. This is where most people lose power. They rely on internal enforcement. They tell themselves they will be strong, that they will resist, that they will try harder next time. Machiavelli would recognize this immediately as a failed system. A prince who relies on virtue alone will be betrayed. A man who relies on self-control alone will betray himself. The hidden mechanism is simple. Humans do not obey ideals, they obey cost. When an action has no downside, it repeats. When an action threatens loss, it stops. This is not a moral statement. It is biology. Pain teaches faster than insight. Fear outpaces intention every time. Watch how you actually behave. When a real consequence appears, you become precise. If missing a deadline risks public embarrassment, you suddenly find focus. If breaking a promise risks losing access, you suddenly remember. If disrespect threatens your reputation, your posture changes instantly. The discipline was never missing. The stakes were. Machiavelli translated this into statecraft. He understood that laws mean nothing without punishment. Mercy without teeth invites chaos. A ruler who forgives endlessly teaches rebellion. A ruler who enforces once teaches order. The same logic governs your internal kingdom. If your mind knows there is no penalty, it will defect. Here is the trap you are in. Modern life removes friction. Everything is reversible. Mistakes are hidden. Comfort is always available. You can quit quietly. You can fail privately. You can delay without witnesses. This creates a soft interior world where your word has no weight. You do not respect your own commands because they carry no force. So you compensate with emotion. You try to hype yourself. You consume motivation. You look for inspiration. That is like decorating a crumbling fortress. The structure is still broken. The correct move is architectural. not emotional. You stop negotiating with yourself and you start installing penalties. Real ones, external ones, consequences that exist outside your mood. Notice how quickly behavior changes when consequences are not symbolic. Money at risk, reputation at risk, access revoked, time lost permanently. When the cost is real, the decision is already made. There is no debate. You move. This is why disciplined people appear calm. They are not wrestling with themselves. The fight was decided earlier by design. The rule is enforced automatically. No drama, no motivation, just procedure. Think of a man who shows up early every day. You assume he is disciplined. In reality, he may simply be afraid of being seen as unreliable, or afraid of losing position, or afraid of disappointing someone he respects. Fear is doing the work. Discipline gets the credit. The herd misunderstands this and moralizes it. They praise willpower, they shame weakness. Machiavelli never did. He ignored character and focused on structure. He asked one question only: what behavior does this system produce? Ask yourself the same. What behavior does your current system reward? Delay is cheap. Comfort is protected. Excuses are tolerated. So delay, comfort, and excuses dominate your life. This is not a personal flaw. It is a governance failure. Until your actions carry cost, nothing will change. You can read more, plan more, promise more. It will not matter. Your mind has learned that disobedience is safe. In the next step, we will identify where your system leaks power and how to seal it. Not with motivation, with consequences that make disobedience expensive. The most dangerous lie you believe is that consequences must come from inside you. They don't. Internal consequences are weak because they are negotiable. You can forgive yourself. You can rationalize. You can rewrite the story. That makes them useless as enforcement. A system that allows the criminal to be the judge collapses into chaos. Machiavelli would never design a state that way, yet this is how you run your life. Look at how you excuse yourself. I was tired. I'll make it up tomorrow. It wasn't the right time. These are not explanations. They are loopholes, and every loophole trains your mind to defect again. The mind is a lawyer, not a monk. It looks for exits. The mechanism underneath is leverage. Leverage means something you value is at risk and you do not control the release. As long as you control the punishment, there is no leverage. True consequences must be external, immediate, and painful enough to register. This is why accountability partners rarely work. They are too kind, they negotiate, they empathize. Empathy dissolves pressure. A real consequence does not care how you feel. It triggers automatically. Machiavelli understood this with brutal clarity. He warned rulers never to depend on the goodwill of men. Goodwill evaporates under stress. Systems endure. Laws backed by force endure. The same is true for self-mastery. You do not rise because you are virtuous. You rise because falling hurts too much. Consider how fast your behavior shifts in hostile environments. A strict workplace, a competitive arena, a public setting where mistakes are visible. Suddenly you are alert, focused, controlled. That is not discipline. That is consequence awareness. Your mistake has been trying to create discipline in a vacuum. You remove all threat and then wonder why nothing moves. Power does not grow in safety. It grows where errors are punished. This does not mean chaos or cruelty. It means design. You decide in advance what happens when you fail, and you make sure you cannot stop it. Here is a simple diagnostic. Ask one question about any habit you keep breaking. What do I lose if I don't do this today? If the answer is nothing real, stop lying to yourself. The habit is not protected. It will fail again. Loss must be concrete, not abstract guilt, not future regret. Those are distant and soft. Loss must be felt now. Money gone, access removed, public exposure, opportunity closed. Machiavelli advised princes to punish once and decisively so the lesson spreads. The same principle applies inward. One clean, enforced penalty teaches faster than 1,000 internal lectures. But most people resist this because of ego. They want to believe they are self-directed, that they act from principle. Installing consequences feels like admitting weakness. In reality, it is admitting reality. You are not above human nature. You are inside it. There is also fear of losing comfort, fear of boxing yourself in, fear of becoming rigid. But understand this, you are already boxed in. You are trapped by inconsistency, self-disgust, and drift. Consequences do not reduce freedom. They create it by forcing movement. Look at high performers closely. Their lives are full of constraints, deadlines, standards, penalties. That pressure produces clarity. When everything matters, you stop wasting time. Your current softness is not kindness, it is neglect. A ruler who never enforces law is not compassionate. He is irresponsible. He allows decay. When you allow yourself to break your word without cost, you are doing the same. The moment you introduce real consequences, your identity shifts. You start respecting your own decisions because they have teeth. Your word becomes a contract, not a wish. This is why promises feel heavy to powerful people. They know promises bind them to consequence. Weak people promise easily because their words mean nothing. In the next step, we will move from theory to placement, where to install consequences so they cannot be bypassed, how to use reputation, access, and irreversible cost to lock behavior into place. Once those gates are installed, discipline becomes irrelevant. The system will move you whether you feel like it or not. Consequences only work if they are placed where you cannot negotiate with them. Most people install consequences in the wrong location. They attach them to mood, energy, or intention. All three collapse under pressure. The correct placement is external and irreversible. Once triggered, the penalty must execute without your consent. Think like a strategist, not a moralist. Where does your behavior actually route through? Money, reputation, access, time. These are the main arteries. You install pressure there, not in your head. Start with money because it is clean. Money does not argue. If missing a task costs you cash immediately, your brain responds, not tomorrow, now. This is why fines work better than lectures. A delayed cost is a suggestion. An instant loss is law. Reputation is next. Humans are social animals. Status loss burns deeper than pain. When failure becomes visible, behavior sharpens. Private failure rots. Public failure reforms. This is why performers rehearse harder when an audience is waiting. Access is the third gate. Access to comfort, access to people, access to privileges you value. When access is conditional, obedience follows. Machiavelli used this constantly. He rewarded loyalty with proximity and punished defection with distance. The court understood the rules without speeches. Time is the final lever. Time is the only resource you cannot refund. When failure permanently costs time, the lesson sticks. Missed windows do not reopen. This is why deadlines change people. The door closes whether you feel ready or not. Now observe the pattern. None of these require motivation. They require structure. Once the penalty is baked in, your feelings are irrelevant. Here is where people sabotage themselves. They install consequences they can disable, refundable penalties, soft deadlines, forgivable losses. This teaches your mind that rules are flexible. Flexibility feels humane. It produces decay. A real consequence must pass 3 tests. It must be immediate. It must be painful enough to matter, and you must not be able to cancel it in the moment. If any of these fail, the system leaks. Look at your habits again, the ones you keep breaking. They survive because they are protected. You have insulated them from loss. Comfort guards them. Privacy hides them. Forgiveness excuses them. So the move is surgical. You don't overhaul your life. You choose one behavior and you wire it to one consequence. One wire, no complexity. Complexity invites loopholes. When the wire is live, something changes instantly. The internal debate disappears. The mind does not ask how it feels. It asks how to avoid loss. That question has a clear answer: act. Machiavelli warned that punishment must be certain, not severe. Certainty teaches faster than brutality. One predictable consequence beats random harshness. Your system should feel cold, not emotional. Notice how this changes your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries. You become someone who follows procedure. Identity follows structure, not the other way around. This is also why self-image affirmations fail. They ask you to feel powerful without power. Consequences give you real authority over yourself. Authority breeds confidence. Confidence does not create authority. There is a secondary effect. Once you enforce consequences on yourself, others sense it. Your boundaries harden. Your words gain weight. People feel that you are not loose with commitments. This increases respect without explanation. Weak people talk about discipline. Powerful people design environments. The final warning is simple. Do not overcorrect. Do not punish everything. Scarcity gives consequence its power. Choose what matters. Protect it with teeth. Let the rest go. In the next phase, you will see how to maintain this system without becoming rigid or paranoid. How to use consequences sparingly, strategically, and only where they produce leverage. For now, understand this. You were never lazy. You were ungoverned. Install law, and order follows. Once consequences exist, the danger shifts. Not weakness, rigidity. Many people finally install pressure and then overdo it. They punish everything. They turn life into a courtroom. This creates rebellion, not against others, against the system itself. When every action carries threat, the mind looks for escape. Machiavelli warned against this mistake. A ruler who governs only through fear becomes hated. Hatred invites revolt. Fear must be precise, controlled, used where it matters and nowhere else. The same applies to you. Consequences are not a lifestyle. They are a tool. You deploy them only where leverage is required. Everywhere else, you keep space. Flexibility is not weakness when it is chosen. It is weakness when it is automatic. Here is the governing principle. Punish violations that threaten your long game. Ignore noise. If a behavior undermines your trajectory, it gets a consequence. If it does not, it gets nothing. No guilt, no drama. Power is conserved by selectivity. This is how you avoid burnout. Burnout does not come from effort. It comes from constant internal war. A clean system ends the war by deciding in advance what matters. Look at a disciplined military unit. They do not enforce everything. They enforce formation, timing, and command. They do not micromanage breathing. The structure is tight where collapse would be fatal and loose where autonomy improves performance. Apply the same logic inward. Another mistake is emotional punishment, shaming yourself, attacking your identity. This feels intense, but it is counterproductive. Shame creates avoidance, not compliance. It makes you hide failure instead of correcting it. Machiavelli avoided this. He punished actions, not essence. A subject who broke the law was corrected or removed. He was not invited to debate his worth. The state does not moralize, it enforces. Your system should be just as cold. Failure triggers consequence. Completion restores neutrality. No pride, no self-loathing. Procedure ends, you move on. This neutrality is what gives the system longevity. Emotional systems burn hot and collapse. Mechanical systems endure. There is also timing. Consequences must be front-loaded, not delayed. Early enforcement prevents future escalation. If you let small violations slide repeatedly, the cost to correct later multiplies. Machiavelli called this cruelty well used, sharp at the beginning, minimal afterward, pain concentrated, not stretched. This is how you train your mind quickly and then relax. Once the behavior is stable, you reduce oversight. The system runs in the background. Understand this. The goal is not to live under punishment. The goal is to make punishment unnecessary by teaching the rule. When the mind learns that boundaries are real, it stops testing them. Testing is expensive. Obedience becomes efficient. This is the paradox. Proper consequences eventually create ease. You no longer negotiate. You no longer bargain. You act and move forward. There is one final calibration most people miss: reward. Consequences are not only negative. Access restored is a reward, pressure removed is a reward, stability is a reward. You do not need treats or praise. Relief is enough. When a behavior is completed, the absence of threat becomes the signal. The nervous system learns safety, follows execution. This reinforces the loop without excitement. Excitement is not the goal. Reliability is. At this stage, your identity shifts quietly. You stop seeing yourself as someone who needs discipline. You see yourself as someone who operates under law. Law creates predictability. Predictability creates trust. Trust creates power. Machiavelli's princes were not loved for their intentions. They were trusted for their consistency. Allies could plan around them. Enemies respected their response. You are building the same reputation internally. This is the long game, not motivation, not intensity, governance. Once governance is installed, you are no longer fighting yourself. You are directing a system that knows the cost of disobedience and chooses compliance as the simplest path. That is sovereignty. At this stage, the real test appears: ego. When consequences begin to work, you will feel powerful. You will feel in control. That feeling is dangerous. Machiavelli warned that success intoxicates faster than wine. A prince who believes his own myth stops watching the machinery. That is when decay begins. The system you built does not make you superior. It makes you accountable. Confusing the two collapses everything. Here is how ego sabotages consequences. You start making exceptions for yourself. Just this once. I've earned it. This is beneath me now. These phrases sound harmless. They are corrosive. They reopen the loopholes you work to close. The mind loves status more than comfort. Once you identify as disciplined, you will protect the identity even at the expense of the system. You will justify small violations to preserve the self-image of mastery. That is regression disguised as growth. Machiavelli never trusted self-perception. He trusted outcomes. If the state was stable, the system worked. If not, sentiment did not matter. You must adopt the same ruthlessness with yourself. The rule is simple. The system applies to you most when you feel least threatened. Power is tested in comfort, not crisis. Another failure point is performative toughness. You begin enforcing consequences publicly, loudly, theatrically. This attracts attention and resistance. Power does not announce enforcement. It executes quietly. Machiavelli advised princes to avoid being hated. Loud punishment invites scrutiny and coalition. Silent enforcement ends problems before they spread. Your internal system should follow this logic. No drama, no speeches, just execution. There is also the temptation to expand control. Once you taste order, you try to optimize everything. Diet, sleep, work, speech, thought. This creates fragility. One slip triggers cascade failure. Total control is brittle. A wise ruler leaves some areas unpoliced. This preserves resilience. The system bends instead of breaking. You must choose where you allow imperfection, not because you are weak, but because resilience requires slack. A rope pulled too tight snaps. Machiavelli observed that fortune shifts, conditions change, systems must adapt. If your consequences cannot adjust, they will become obsolete or oppressive. So you audit regularly, not emotionally, structurally. Is this consequence still producing the behavior I want? Is it still costly enough? Is it now excessive? Systems are alive. They require maintenance. Another subtle trap is outsourcing responsibility entirely to the system. You stop paying attention. You assume the mechanism will catch everything. That is negligence. Law without oversight becomes hollow. The prince still watched his generals, not because he distrusted them, but because vigilance preserves power. You must stay aware of your own incentives. When the environment shifts, incentives shift with it. There is one final layer most people never reach: internalization. When a consequence has done its work, you retire it. Yes, retire it. This is not mercy. It is efficiency. The behavior has been trained. Continuing punishment wastes energy and breeds resentment. This is the mark of mastery, knowing when to enforce and when to withdraw. Machiavelli wrote that cruelty, when necessary, should be brief. Prolonged cruelty creates enemies. Prolonged self-punishment creates rebellion. Once a behavior stabilizes, you remove the penalty and monitor. If it holds, the system has succeeded. If it degrades, you reintroduce pressure, calmly, without shame. Over time, your system becomes lighter, not heavier. Fewer consequences, fewer rules, more trust in a structure that has proven itself. This is the opposite of self-help culture. They add more rules, more hacks, more discipline rituals. You remove everything that is unnecessary. What remains is simple: clear rules, clear costs, clear outcomes. At this level, people around you notice something different. Not intensity, not obsession, calm reliability. You do what you say because your system demands it, not because you feel inspired. That reliability becomes your real power. Others can plan around you. You become predictable in execution and unpredictable in leverage. Machiavelli prized this above all else. A prince whose actions are consistent becomes difficult to manipulate. Allies trust him, enemies hesitate. You have now built the same internally. Discipline was never the goal. Control was. The final shift is quiet. No surge, no announcement, just a change in gravity. Once consequences govern your behavior, you stop asking how to force yourself to act. Action becomes the default. Inaction becomes expensive. This reverses the old pattern where effort was painful and avoidance was free. Most people never experience this state. They live inside constant negotiation. Every task is a debate. Every decision drains energy. They call this discipline fatigue. In reality, it is governance failure. Machiavelli understood that the strongest states are boring, predictable, uneventful. Drama signals instability. When the system works, nothing feels heroic. Things simply happen on time. This is where you arrive. Your days lose emotional spikes. You do not hype yourself up or beat yourself down. You execute procedures and move on. This frees cognitive space. With fewer internal conflicts, you think longer, colder, and more strategically. Now notice the secondary effect. Because you are no longer fighting yourself, you become harder for others to manipulate. Guilt stops working. Pressure loses leverage. Deadlines from others no longer hijack your priorities because your own system already assigned cost. This is sovereignty in practice. Not dominance over others, control over access to your time, attention, and energy. At this level, your environment starts adapting to you. People learn your limits without confrontation. They stop asking for things you won't give. They adjust because resistance is consistent and unemotional. Machiavelli would recognize this immediately. Authority that does not argue is the most efficient form of power. The moment you explain yourself, you invite negotiation. The moment consequences are known, negotiation ends before it begins. There is a deeper layer here. You stop identifying with effort. Effort becomes incidental. The work happens because not working costs more. This dissolves resentment. You no longer feel like life is forcing you. You chose the system. The system now carries the burden. This is why freedom increases, not decreases. Freedom is not the absence of constraint. It is the absence of internal chaos. Clear rules liberate energy. Look back at who you were before. You relied on moods, on inspiration, on self-talk that made you fragile. Any disruption derailed you. Now disruption is just data. The system absorbs it. When something breaks, you don't spiral. You adjust incentives. You redesign consequences. You correct the architecture. Emotional reaction is replaced with structural response. This is the Machiavellian mindset applied inward. You stop moralizing your behavior. You stop narrating your struggle. You operate. There's also humility in this. You no longer believe you are special or exempt from human nature. You accept that you respond to incentives like everyone else. That acceptance makes you stronger, not weaker. Most people cling to the fantasy of being self-directed. They want to believe they act from pure intention. Machiavelli stripped that illusion away centuries ago. He was not cruel, he was precise. You have now adopted that precision. From here, growth becomes cumulative. Each stable behavior reduces the need for oversight. Each removed consequence lightens the system. Over time, you govern less because you need to govern less. This is the paradox. The more control you install early, the less control you need later. Your identity stabilizes, not as a disciplined person, but as a reliable one. Reliability compounds. Opportunities trust consistency. Power flows toward those who do not wobble. None of this required motivation. None of it required belief. It required design. You did not become better. You became governed. That is the difference. Most people try to win the day. You built a system that wins regardless of the day. That is why you no longer feel urgency. Urgency belongs to the unstructured. Calm belongs to those who installed consequence and stepped back. Discipline was never the engine. Consequence was. And now, the engine runs without you watching it. You started this thinking you needed discipline. You leave knowing that was never true. Discipline is what people talk about when they don't understand power. It sounds noble, it feels personal, it keeps the ego intact. Consequences are colder, they remove the story, they expose the design. You have seen the shift. From trying to obey yourself to governing yourself, from emotion to structure, from hope to inevitability. This knowledge is not comforting. It strips away the last excuse. If your life drifts now, it is not because you are weak. It is because you allowed a system with no teeth to run your kingdom. That realization cannot be undone. Machiavelli warned that power is a burden. Once you understand how control actually works, you lose the luxury of ignorance. You cannot go back to motivational speeches or rituals. You will see them for what they are, noise. The danger now is ego. Do not turn this into a performance. Do not punish for the sake of identity. Do not become rigid to prove something. The long game is quiet. The long game is boring. The long game wins. Use consequences sparingly. Place them where failure would cost you your future, not your pride. Remove them when they have done their job. A wise ruler knows when to enforce and when to withdraw. If this changed how you see yourself, understand this is only the surface. There are principles of power, timing, and reputation that cannot be spoken publicly without dilution. Those are reserved for the few who are ready to govern, not consume. If you want to go deeper, you know where to look. Subscribe if you haven't, and if you want what is kept off the public board, step inside. Silence will do the rest.